Welcome to WITI Talks Diversity and Inclusion. We recently talked with Suzy Greenberg, Vice President of Product Assurance and Security at Intel, about her role, her career journey, and her perspectives on diversity and inclusion initiatives at Intel. We hope you enjoy the conversation. Can you tell us about your role at Intel?
I'm in what's called our product assurance and security group here, and I lead the team that's executing our global security communication strategy and the way we engage and track and respond to matters involving security. So, we have a tremendous opportunity at Intel to really lead and role model how everyone should be looking at security and the way that you approach that and engage. And whether it be assurance practices, to where we're working on being best in class, or the products and technologies that we're delivering. It's really about supporting that ecosystem change and the approach that everyone takes when they're looking at security.
How are you involved in Intel's employee resource groups and leadership councils?
At Intel, we have what we call employee resource groups, or ERGs. And within that, there's also 7 leadership councils. So I am the co-chair with another colleague supporting the Intel Latinx Leadership Council. And the goal of these resource groups is really to encourage employees to participate, to build relationships with a wider community, and be able to exchange learnings, have fun together, and really support one another as we're kind of going through our career journeys. I was aware and somewhat evolved when I joined Intel 14 years ago. I was asked to join and become co-chair during the pandemic, and it was a difficult time for all of us. I appreciate that. But there was a feeling of isolation. You don't have that social element. We were still trying to figure out how we engaged with each other and how we made those personal connections in this new, very isolating way. And I was homeschooling 3 children, no family nearby. So this resource group for me personally, just it was an open door for me to step up and play a bigger role in the group. And it was truly a godsend in terms of me being able to find some sense of purpose and to help me build those connections and feel like I belonged and a part of this community, especially during those few first months of the pandemic when things were incredibly trying.
Can you tell us a bit about your family background?
Sure. So my grandfather was born in Mexico and moved to the United States in the Los Angeles area when he was younger. Met my grandma and had 2 sons, one of which was my dad. And so that's my background from a Hispanic perspective. My dad was an incredible role model for me. He was the first Hispanic federal judge ever nominated, one of the youngest. What he was able to, my grandfather was self-made, and really just built himself up and had a successful career in property investments, and really an emphasis on education because my grandfather didn't have that. And so, between education having a huge emphasis and importance into my family, just the emphasis on family as well has always been the things that I always make sure that I'm prioritizing because that was the example that I had growing up.
What did the ERGs and leadership councils do to help employees during the pandemic?
We did a couple things. One was early on, appreciating the fact that folks were feeling fatigued from being online all day and having to be on the phone and engaged and present. And so, one of the things that we really tried to do was have more personal connections with folks and not make it so um, intense in terms of adding to their social calendars by an additional Zoom meeting at the end of the day, which was intended to be a social gathering, but really just kind of put more on individuals to feel like they had to come and do all the things and be present in a way that they just weren't capable of in that time. So it was really giving space for folks to be able to talk about where they were, the challenges that they were facing, I had a lot of conversations with women who were struggling with homeschooling. I could relate. I have 3 young kids, one of who was in preschool at the time. We'd give him a coloring book and hope that he would make it through a call, and 5 minutes in, he'd be telling me his hand hurted. So, we needed to be able to support each other and really kind of just remove all the boundaries and the titles and just strip it down to what was real. And that was that we were all challenged with a number of things during that time. And that just fresh perspective and that realness, I think, was incredibly welcomed during that time. And we were all on a level playing field, right? We were all having this experience together. We were all online. And so it truly did bring people together. And it's one of the things as we kind of start to get towards that endemic that I'm really looking forward to is being able to pick and choose those things that I want to really invest in moving forward, whether it be the way that I engage with my colleagues or the time that I spend with my family and the way that I'm able to balance or try to balance. I always talk about work-life balance being a myth, but to give that very intentional perspective to everything that I'm doing and focus where I am, but on my time and on my schedule, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what the next year is like for sure. And let's figure out what's going to make us better individuals and help us thrive personally as individuals and as moms and colleagues and friends. I think that this, if we do it, if everyone can just kind of be intentional, I think that everyone will be able to do it right for themselves. And hopefully we'll see everyone feeling a lot better about where they are.
Can you tell us your thoughts about the importance of making technology more inclusive?
There are a number of efforts that we've seen, especially in the last few years, that are really focused on making technology more inclusive. And I read an article actually a few years ago that really stuck with me in Harvard Business Review that talked about how technology reflects the people who create it, right? Their perspectives, their experience. They shape how products are designed, how you see user interfaces when you're looking at your phone. And this could be as broad as a smart city or a speaker system, right? These are all the things that are becoming more pervasive in our lives. That's why we need to be more secure and be mindful of that. But as an unintended consequence of that, you often see inequality and exclusion as two things that tend to come into play as well when you have that perspective and those experiences shaping those technologies. One area that has been something I've invested a lot of time and energy, and I started this before the pandemic, was with a small team of folks to focus on engineering language that has truly demoralized many of our friends and our colleagues and our customers. And again, even if it's done so intentionally, there are 2 sets of words that this team, because we were literally only 4 people when we got together in 18, was master slave and whitelist blacklist. And these were phrases that are used in encoding language. They're in textbooks from the 70s. They're very, very pervasive. Making these changes and having people shift to more inclusive language like primary, secondary, or allow and deny, um, that is an insignificant lift. It wasn't about putting labels on others or somehow implying that people were racist or that they couldn't understand. It was trying to really kind of change that whole view about the way that language really impacts people, that words really matter. And, so we've seen a significant shift in the last year and a half. And in April of last year, actually, Intel and a number of other companies announced a new industry coalition called the Alliance for Global Inclusion. And one of their goals is this inclusive engineering language. And so, we had a conversation panel earlier this week with Dell and Micron and a few others. And it's just like the work is just beginning, but I just feel like now we have this huge groundswell of support and people are paying attention and everyone is really coming together. And the way that we talk about technology and the words that we use and really trying to include everyone from that perspective.
What are your thoughts on sponsors and mentors? And how are they different?
Sponsor, I like to talk about that as representation on your behalf, especially when you're not in that proverbial room. A sponsor is going to advocate for you, can represent your work, your value, your potential, even more importantly, right? They raise their hand and they say, I think that Suzy could go and do that job. You should talk to her. That's sponsorship to me. And I think those are, 1 to 2 maybe relationships that you really cultivate, and that they go very deep, because this person needs to understand you on a level that folks on a daily basis aren't going to necessarily see. Typically they tend to be a little bit higher up in the company, above you, and they have an interest in your success, right? You have confidence that they are going to speak up in that room because they believe in you and because they have the relationships themselves, to advocate in that way. They're harder to find too. I've had times where I've felt very very sponsored, and felt like I was as my cup runneth over in terms of support in that area. And then there are other times, one of which was around the pandemic time, where I felt very alone and I didn't necessarily know if there was anyone that was speaking up for me in the room. And so that those are challenging. I do have a few folks now. I don't think we've necessarily formalized that relationship in the sense where I'm like, will you please be my sponsor? But I do have that confidence, and I do invest that time with those individuals to make sure that they're aware of what I'm doing and what I am absolutely capable of. Mentors, I tend to look at those a little bit more casually. I think they're a lot more fun because you can kind of pick and choose different mentors for different things that you need, right? I have, mentors that can help me understand technical challenges. I don't have an engineering degree, so sometimes I need someone to just explain something to me technically that I'm not going to grok, and I don't want to necessarily raise my hand in the room and be like, I don't understand what this is. So being able to have someone that you can kind of ping behind the scenes that's not going to judge you and is going to help walk you through that technology, is incredibly valuable. I think in general, I will say that regardless of those 2 different areas, the best advice I can give you, the best thing that you can do for these relationships, is to be open and honest. Be transparent about what your aspirations are. Talk about what is important to you, because the more you say it out loud, the more you remind yourself, right? Obviously, my family is always going to be the number one most important thing to me. But sometimes when you get caught up in this work and this job, you can lose sight of that. So being able to say that out loud and to have people kind of keep you in check. And I got a note last night late from someone who we were exchanging messages on a different topic, and just said a little something like, hey, hope your family's doing well and you're able to, spend the time and do what you need to support them. And um, we weren't even talking about family, but he brought that up, and I was like, yeah, I will. You're right. I am, I think, but good reminder, and I'm going to continue to do that. So, that honesty goes both ways too. So just, kind of my last thought, I think, is, be open to hearing things about you that you might not see, or that you might not believe to be true. And I'm not talking about negative things. I'm talking about really good things, right? The things that are really hard for us sometimes to just believe are true. So be open to receiving that feedback. Say thank you. Take it in and use it to energize yourself and kind of take you to that next place. I think both the mentor and sponsorship roles can really get a lot of value out of those doing that.
What is your approach as a mentor or sponsor?
A few things that I've done is offer to have monthly calls with a number of folks on my team who are up and coming, that are just either new to Intel and trying to navigate that space, or just I want to help them feel comfortable that they can come to me with their challenges or issues. So I do mentor a lot of people that are within my team itself. The latest that I've done that I think is hopefully adding some value is to be a part of our warm line effort. So when individuals are going through challenges and they reach out to folks at Intel, we can get matched through a series of questions, and I can provide my help and support that way as well. So that's something new that I've been doing in the last few months, and really has given me a lot of perspective on things that we can improve in as a company, as leaders, and is also giving me a number of new friends and relationships as well. So those are a couple ways that I put myself out there.
What have been some of your biggest career challenges, and how have you responded?
I mentioned it earlier. I don't have a degree in engineering, and so that's always interesting when you work at a technology company or you've spent the last 25 years in technology. Um, to this day, it's something that I have to work to overcome, which is amazing. But I've been called the comms girl, or been reminded I'm not an engineer. Where it's just like, yep, I'm aware. And you have to wonder, and it's harder when you're younger or you're just starting out. I've had decades of experience now, so I can reflect a bit and kind of take a step back and say, is that maybe a lack of your own self-confidence there that you need to kind of bring this into play? There's going to always be those individuals who will put you down to build themselves up. And so I think that's the biggest lesson that I've learned in terms of just trying to turn down the noise around me. And so it's hard. And so my advice, and it's the same, and I say it like out loud so I can remind myself here as well, is that you've made it this far because you've excelled in your career. You've been successful at a number of technology companies, and you've proven yourself, right? Time and again. And sometimes it's worth it just to stop and think about even what you've accomplished in the last 3 months. I bet everyone could take a moment to just breathe and think about some big milestones that they achieved, and look back and go, wow, like I did that. And if we just take those times to remember that others believe in us, and even if there are those naysayers, they're not the ones that matter. And then the other thing that is always challenging for me, especially this last decade, is that navigating being a mother and an executive at a company like Intel. I mentioned earlier, there's a myth of work-life balance. I really try to role model being intentional about the work you do, and the work that you won't do. What are your conditions of satisfaction, and how is that going to help you focus on the things that are most important in your life? And you don't have a family, maybe it's a certain hobby, or maybe it's traveling, and we can all go do that again. It doesn't have to just be like if you're a mother or a father, then you get a certain priority. I think everyone can take this moment to kind of think about where they want to prioritize their time. We should feel empowered to look for opportunities that allow us to thrive in our careers, and then be with our loved ones when we need to be. It's really, this is something that I had to come to terms with, is that negotiating when it comes to things with my family, not going to happen. If I'm asked to decide what's the most important thing to me, or if I'm going to be at my son's game, or I'm going to be in a meeting, I might have to do both, but I'm going to do it because I've made that decision for me, and I know that it's not going to negatively impact my children. I want to be a really great role model for them, but I also want to make sure um, that I am giving them the time and the attention that they deserve, because this period in our lives with them being young is going to be gone before I know it, and I won't be able to get it back. So that's something I'm especially thinking about as we talk about this return to the workplace, or coming back to work. It's something that I spend a lot of time thinking about, and it's one of the challenges I think I've most struggled with, is just finding um, that unattainable balance between the work and how much I'm able to focus on my family.
Can you share your thoughts on the importance of giving a voice to disability awareness?
One thing I've really seen is just and more intentional work around disability awareness. And this was, one of the other leadership councils that I was talking about, which is another great way that we really try to keep accountability within the company, and also externally talk about this work that we're doing to invest in our communities. But I'm also a member of the Disability Leadership Council, and it was almost by accident that happened. It was an accident, actually. I was on a completely different call with someone, and I just happened to he happened to mention some of the work he was doing because he knew I was on the Latinx side. And I said, "Oh, that's so funny. I've never even thought about joining that group or opting in. I'm deaf in my right ear." And he's like, "What?" Like, I had no idea. And it's just like, yeah. And he's like, "Well, then he wanted to know my whole story, and how I became deaf. They think it's when I was 2 years old. I had scarlet fever. I developed my sound, so they didn't think it was from birth, but it's just something I've lived with my whole life. So I never thought to be overly communicative about it. It definitely creates its challenges, especially in like social settings. Again, leveling the playing field. You would never know. I have my earpiece in one ear, and why would it matter? But if I was at a dinner and someone was sitting on the side of me, I would have a really hard time in the evening, because especially if it wasn't someone I know. I always put my husband on this side because he knows and he can, elbow me. But it's difficult if you're in a social setting, you're meeting someone and they plop down on this side because you just happened, that was the last seat you could get. I can't hear them. And, then I have to tell them I can't hear in that ear. And so those are the things that I've just always lived with. And it's just part of who I am, but not to the sense where I talk a lot about it. And one of the things that this person told me that really just struck home is that there are so many other people like you with different disabilities that aren't talking about it. And not just because maybe they've lived with it the whole their lives, so it's just part of who they are and they've accepted it, but because they don't feel like they have the ability or the forum or the voice to do that. And so if I'm willing to go out and talk about my disability and the challenges it presents to me and the opportunities I see for Intel to really kind of help support those folks, well, then that's why it's important for me to talk about, my disability and the journey I've had and the challenges I face. And, that gives permission to others to talk more about what they're going through and what they're experiencing. And a lot of these disabilities are not someone, in a wheelchair or someone who's blind. These are things that we don't see that may impact an employee or someone in their family. And then how do we make that community and that support system grow? And so that's something I'm seeing just across the board. That's my example specifically, but I see more of that in a lot of different areas where these communities are coming up really to give a voice to these individuals who didn't feel like they had one before, who thought that they might be distracting from their work, or be viewed negatively because they had something that might impact their ability to do their best every single day. We need to give space for those individuals to be able to talk about what they're going through, what their experiences are, what their what their capabilities are, what they can't do, and support them. So those are some of the things I see in the next few years really starting to make a difference, is just creating that forum, that opportunity for everyone to bring their best selves to their daily lives and to their work.